So I think that's a great transition to start. I want to make sure that we have enough time for our conversation, and we have so many creatives on this call, and this is such an important conversation. So I want us to just dig in. I want to really quickly open the program up before I turn it over to Jodi and our special guests to just do a quick Zoom run through. I apologize for those of you who've been to many of these programs with me, heard this spiel before, but to introduce myself really quick, I'm Abby King, the Assistant Director of Adult Programs here at PAFA. I facilitate these live events that we have each week. And I just wanted to first say welcome to all of you. I think I recognize quite a few people on this call, but there's some new people, some artists I've admired that I maybe haven't met in person. So glad to have you here with us. This is a program that we want to encourage discussion. We want to hear from all of you. So I want to quickly go over how we are going to facilitate that. To start with, basically Zoom has two views. So right now, if I'm the giant head at the bottom of your screen, you're in speaker mode. If you'd like to change that and see everyone in the community, you can go up to the right-hand corner and click where it says gallery view, and then you'll see all 27 folks who are on this call. I would recommend for the beginning, if you want to be able to see Jodi and Lee and Paige large, that you keep it on speaker view for the start, and then when we open it up to questions towards the end and that discussion, you can kind of switch between. The nice thing with Zoom is your screen can look however you want, so whatever feels good is your preference. I did have everyone muted when we started, and I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody now, and our speakers, of course, feel free to unmute yourself. I'm doing this because Zoom likes to assume it knows who the speaker is. So if you're unmuted and say like a cat pops into your screen or a siren goes down the street, it's going to zoom over to you for the people who are in speaker mode. So a little bit like silence your cell phones, we're just going to ask you to silence your screen unless you're actively speaking. But again, we do want to hear from you. This isn't just a talking head program, so feel free to drop things in the chat if you have thoughts. If you have questions about this or future program, I'm also dropping in my email here as well. The chat is a great place to put in links, other things, questions when we get to that part as well. You can also virtually raise your hand. So the way you do that is if you click on the participant button at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer. From there, on the right-hand side, you'll see a little button that says raise hands. That's how we're going to call on people. So when Jodi opens it up for discussion, we'll ask you to virtually raise your hand. Or if you have a lot of trouble with that and don't see it, feel free to go like this and we will find you, I promise. But for now, this is just the easiest way to organize the event. The last thing I'll mention is to mute and unmute, of course, is at the bottom of your screen or the top if you're on an iPad, I believe. It's a little microphone button. Right next to that is a video button as well. We are recording today's event because we want to be able to share this with some of the folks who can't be with us today. If you don't want to be on video, you're welcome to silence your video. So if you click on that again, there'll be a red line that pops through. I will also say, unless you're actively speaking, you're most likely not going to be on the recording. It really only records the active speakers. But just in case that makes you uncomfortable, that is the option that we have for this as well. Other than that, I want to make sure to turn it over to our speakers. But again, thank you all so much for being here. Again, if you have questions, my email's in the chat. And so now it's my pleasure to hand it over to my colleague, Curator of Contemporary Art, Jodi Throckmorton, and our special guests, Paige West and Lee Stoetzel of the West Collection. Thank you all for being here.
Morning, everybody. I'm up here waving. Thank you all for joining us this morning. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces, and thank you to Lee Stoetzel and Paige West from the West Collection for joining us today as well. I've been really inspired to see what you've been doing for artists in this moment, and frankly, before that, with all the work that you've been doing with the West Collection. And so it's great to learn more about what you're doing here today. And as Abby mentioned, Paige and Lee are going to do a presentation for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So you're welcome to put questions in the chat as they go through their presentation, or save them for the end. So with that, I'll kick it off to Lee and Paige. Thank you.
Thank you, Jodi, and hello, everyone. It's lovely to see you all virtually. And Lee and I were used to doing the tag team dog and pony show, but usually it's live, so I can bump him when I'm like, okay, your turn. So this is our first time doing this together virtually. So forgive any awkwardness that will surely happen and speaking over one another. So, and Lee, I know you have slides,
Yeah.
speaking for the first time. So we do have some images to show you. And I thought what we would do is just kind of run through a very brief history of the West Collection, and then start to focus more on what the recent initiative, the LIFTS initiative that we started, as well as the emergency funds for artists. We can talk a little bit about that as well if you're interested in hearing about that. So the West Collection started.
Is this sharing?
It is on my screen. Okay. Yeah, so the West Collection started really, I think I was 28, which was eons ago, many years ago. My father's company is located outside of Philadelphia. It's called SEI. And he was building this beautiful new campus that you see. And at the time, I was in graduate school in New York City studying arts administration at NYU, having just gotten out of the Christie's program and for curatorial studies. And he wanted artwork. He came to me, approached me and said, I want to put some art at the new campus. And at the time I thought, okay, great, I'll introduce you to some corporate art curators that will help you put art in the campus. And he said, no, I want you to do it. So I said, well, okay, being my father's daughter, if we're going to do it, let's do it a little differently. And obviously, being 28-year-old, I was definitely interested in doing it my way, meaning I was interested in collecting art that I was interested in, which at the time was emerging art, all media, but definitely art by living artists. I was also not interested in decorating the halls. I was interested in kind of putting a live, breathing collection that people would engage in at the collection. So then this image is a picture of the unique structure that was built for SEI outside in Oaks, Pennsylvania. And there were no offices, so this was not an opportunity for people to have art in their own private space. A lot of corporations and they have the executive office wing, and this is where the interns sit and all of the stuff. And Lee and I've actually toured a lot of corporate collections when we started down this road, and found it very interesting to see that the hierarchy of art placed throughout the corporation, the better art was placed on the executive wings, or what was deemed better or more valuable, if you will. And so the SEI is based on a team environment where everyone sits at the same desk. The executives, they all have the same size space. It's an open environment. So for Lee and I, that was a lot of fun because we got to focus on art for everyone, meaning that there were no areas that would be saved for executives. The challenge that brought was that art for everyone, not everyone. In fact, most people, when we started hanging art at SEI, they did not like the art at all. It was so disliked that a lot of pieces we found, Lee and I were both, when we were going to install art at the company, as well as when we were not there, the art, we were being told they didn't like the art. They were like, you can't hang that there. That's horrible. My kid could do that. Those kind of comments, which were really hard on Lee and I. So we started putting art up during the night. We became art elves just to avoid the comments. And what happened is people started removing things from the wall and putting them in closets, and we'd find them turned against the wall and whatnot. And we set out to say, okay, look, we get it. Not everybody likes this type of art, but we were, to protect the art, we were putting the best art back into storage and trying to find things and it wasn't working. So we created this program based on the Progressive Insurance Company at the time had a space where they would put controversial art, and we created Hot Hall for that very reason. And so Hot Hall was an area at SEI that people could vote anonymously to get the work removed from their area and put into an area called Hot Hall. We found that our favorite work, and some of the best work, we think, because it's really creating emotion and feeling in people, was landing in Hot Hall, and Hot Hall was getting bigger and bigger, and the works were just staying in Hot Hall. And it was an area that was a corridor, a hallway along where employees had to go to the cafeteria, the mail room was down there, the gym was down there. So it was an area that everybody kind of had to go through. And we started a program for people to be able to adopt works out of the hot hall so that we made sure that the work that went in there wasn't stuck there. So years went by, and 15 years in particular went by, and we started getting emails from people at SEI saying, the employees saying that we weren't collecting hot work anymore. Why was the hot hall so boring? That we needed to kind of step it up. This was what we were hearing from people. And Lee and I felt we were kind of amazed because our aesthetic had not changed in a way that we hadn't lightened up, if you will. But what had happened, what we realized is that there was an organization that we had kind of brought along on our journey and expanded their eye in and appreciation and experience with art. And so that has been a lot of fun. And so now at the corporation, we have teams that are actually curating their own spaces. They work with Lee in particular to find art that speaks to them and their team. So that's been a lot of fun. And we offer tours, and it's been open to the public. Well, we got to a place where we started realizing, one, I never stopped collecting. And so we have a lot of art that actually can't be shown, both for reasons of sound. We have a lot of sound installations, video works as well, that just doesn't work in a corporate setting, as well as just the number of pieces that we have. Lee and I, about 10 years ago, probably now it's been about 15 years, that we said we've got to find a way to take this public, or at least get some of the art publicly shown. And so that's what we have been working on most recently, is we found a space in Philadelphia that we're converting to a public art space.
Hey, Paige.
Yes.
Not to interrupt, but the back to your oftentimes people just are very curious what artworks were voted out and what artworks are in the hot hall. And just saying, I have that slide up with Jill Greenberg's Crying Kids right now.
That's correct. And did you keep so what we did in the hot hall, so this is Jill Greenberg's work. She called this body of work End Times, and she made it at the time that a president was reelected that she was not happy about the reelection of. And she worked with children and their mothers. These were models who she would bring into the studio, give them candy, make them happy, and then have the mother remove the candy or take the candy away, and would get these photographs. Well, they were not popular at SEI, and people were writing, yes, that's what I was wondering if you had some of the.
We have the comments, a couple slides here.
Yeah, so the people did not like looking at crying kids all day while they were working. So in hot hall, this is a good way for me to introduce that we wouldn't just stick artwork in a hallway. Each piece that was voted into hot hall surrounding the artwork, we would put the quotes, the anonymous quotes that came in that were which was why we removed the piece. But then we also put our comments about why we collected the work or why we liked the work, as well as the artist's intentions with the work, a little bit of background on the art itself. So the piece was hung with a lot of information surrounding it. So Jill's is a good example of work that I believe was just recently actually moved out of hot hall, correctly?
It's gone in and out 3 different times. Once altogether, all 8 portraits of these kids, and at other times just 1 or 2 have been adopted, and then neighboring teams have also complained about the team that adopted them. So they've been bouncing in and out.
That's right. Do you have any other examples?
So here's the Grimm Christoph Draeger Lockerbie puzzle piece.
Yeah.
And it has never been adopted.
It's quite large. Lee, would you say?
Probably 6 by 8 feet. So the press footage was made into an archival photograph, and then a puzzle company punches through the face of the photograph. So it looks like a giant frame jigsaw puzzle that you could actually work, but it's under glass, so you can't get to it to touch it. And most people feel it's like a very sarcastic or cold or cold approach to the world. Anyway, also we had Syracuse alumni, a girls rugby team a Syracuse rugby team was on board Lockerbie. And we have a bunch of Syracuse grads who work for SEI. So it was felt that this was very insensitive when it was first shown, and we removed it from public view at that time.
And then put it into HAFA. Yeah, that's a good example. So I don't know where the slideshow goes, but do you want to transition to the prize, the West?
We're Paige. So go on gallery view up top with your view, and you should be able to see. We're at Narrow House. Can you just talk about how that went down recently?
Erwin Worm's work. So Erwin Worm is an artist that we've collected for years. We found Erwin Worm in a museum in Paris at a group show with Fat Car, which is a car like this is called Narrow House, the image that you're looking at, and it's a life-size house that he has made narrow. And so Fat Car, as you can imagine, was a real car that looks like it had gained weight. And so we collected him with Fat Car, and then he has a number of photographs and
Fat House, you also collected.
We collected Fat House, which is a house that looks like it also has gained weight. And most recently, we went to visit Erwin at his studio in Austria, and learned of this piece, which is Narrow House, which is his childhood home that he recreated to scale, but in a narrow fashion. So, for instance, it looks exactly like, so the bathroom, this was the bathroom that, and the colors that he grew up with, that he basically just created in a narrow view.
Can I just interject one additional thing? That Paige, she hasn't said this yet, but she is really interested in, if you haven't been able to tell from slides, in how people experience work. And so, not surprising that Erwin Worm has been a choice, because you can see the person standing here outside Narrow House with a camera. It turns out you can also walk inside of Narrow House. So the dimension of this piece is 23 and a half feet vertically, 4.5 feet wide, just wide enough for you to walk down through the piece and experience this scale and compression yourself as a visitor. So
these are recent acquisitions. Lee, you want to talk? You discovered this.
Yeah. Well, you all should know, if you don't, Mark Gibson, who's here in Philadelphia now teaching at Temple. And we met with Mark recently at SEI, and he's an amazing guy. We're lucky, I think, to have him in Philadelphia. And Paige ended up really loving him and the work, and collected 4 large paintings in the month of March or late February. By paintings, I mean these, ink on canvas or ink on support pieces, and this is one of them. The Washington crossing the Delaware, his version. And Zanelli Mahali at Venice last summer, and Paige saw this with her family, collected these very works. She also obviously makes the stage photos in smaller, intimate sized wall works, but we were thinking the power of these is unbelievable. So these are wallpaper works, or, applique. They can be, I think they go up to 14 feet high or something like that.
Cool. Oh, and the SEI has a relationship with the Kimmel Center. They created a center there, but because of SEI's relationship with the Kimmel, they asked us to bring art to their environment. And so there was a period of time where we installed larger works in the atrium there at the Kimmel, as well as down below where there's an SEI Performance Center, I believe. So these are some of the large works that were installed at the Kimmel. And then downstairs, we curated a smaller area. Okay, so West Prize. So in 2009, after the recession that was hit, and a lot of galleries were closing and artists found themselves in financial straits. And we, as collectors, to be fair, selfishly, were having a hard time finding new work by emerging artists. We had a reputation for collecting young art, and so we were being shown a lot through galleries, but we just didn't feel like we were getting to artists that had yet were at the beginning of their career. And so we came up with this idea to put a competition out there to anybody who's interested in applying, and it was called the West Acquisition Prize, the West Prize. And Lee will remember the stats because my old brain can't, but it was
11,000 applicants over 4 years.
So we had 11,000 applicants over, thank you, Lee. And each year we had 10 winners that we would acquire $10,000 worth of their work for. And then out of that group of 10, one was selected as the winner to receive $25,000 of grants funds, if you will, to use any way that they felt they needed to. And so that ran for 4 years quite successfully. And Lee, I can't remember the number of artists you just said over 4 years, that was the number of applicants total. So we ran that for 4 years and then focused on other things and let the prize go. So we're in development right now, working on a public space in Philadelphia that will be launched. It's the old Otis Elevator Factory. Oh, these are some of I didn't realize we had slides of some of the winners.
Yeah. Does Billy still teach there at PAFA? He's still teaching his class.
Yes.
So they were great. And Matthew, you're on the call. I know you've worked with them doing a big show at Haverford. But they've been amazing to know for all these years. And Paige collected the ice cream truck tank through that. There was a lady at SEI who kind of threw herself in front of it when we first put it here at the windows and said that the brothers were trying to kill kids and we had to get it out of there the first day. And then we talked to her and told her that they were coming to serve ice cream that day. And she came to the ice cream social and Billy charmed her to no end. And it was amazing. And she loved the piece after that. She loved him and loved the piece. And it was great. And this is an artist, Billy Grace Lynn from Shreveport, Louisiana, grew up on a cattle farm and made all this hardcore recycled cow bone work from sick cows on commercial farms, and wants to tell the world not to eat another cow and not to burn up the planet. And she does these rides to punctuate this fact.
Cool. So yeah, there's an SEI employee. So lifts came about. So when we were, we've been in development on the Otis Elevator Factory to transition it to a public art space. And in developing the plan for that space, we thought it would be fun and a nice idea to bring the West Prize back at the launch of the opening of the new space. And so then we were in development, ready to kind of break ground, if you will, and COVID hit and we were all sent into shelter. And so we obviously stopped working on the space. And two things happened. One is, we recognized quickly that people were losing jobs, and there was a lot of uncertainty about what was to come. And so I was worried for both friends, peers, artists, galleries. The discussion was grim. And so Lee actually came up with the idea that why are we waiting to launch the West Prize? Is there anything that we could do now to assist artists? Because collecting, we were feared, would be drying up. I think a lot of galleries feared that, there's going to be a pause on collecting, and nobody knows really when kind of we'll be back to life as usual. So I thought it was a great idea. I said to Lee, this is great, see if we can bump it up and just do it now. So we relaunched the West Prize with a bit of a twist in that there are still 10 winners. It was an annual event last year. This time we just decided one every week for 10 weeks, we would select one winner. And that winner we would be acquiring $5,000 worth of work and then giving them $5,000 to use as they see fit or as they need. And so we're on week 4. We just announced our 4th winner. And while we were developing the Lifts Prize, I realized we were only going to reach 10 artists. Is there any way that we could reach more? I had an experience on Instagram. A young artist that I follow in Chicago, he lives in Chicago, had reached out on Instagram to say that he was worried about getting evicted and he was short $11, and could anybody spot him the money so that he could pay his rent? And I was moved by that and thought, there's a lot of people out there. I wish that we could help more than 10 artists. And is there any way that we could get them funds right now as needed kind of thing? So that's when we came up with the idea for for the emergency funds for visual artists initiative, which is something we had never done before, and kind of said, well, let's give this a shot. And I put aside the same amount of prize, if you will, money for the Lifts initiative for these emergency funds. And in 3 days, we went above and beyond what we were initially set out to do, which was $100,000. I think we gave $159,000, $160,000 out. And we had 152 or 58 applicants. And everybody that applied got money. And we had to close it after 3 days because it was tapped out. And I would like to relaunch. In fact, my brother, very sweet, Al, would like to give money to continue to help artists as needed. So we look to relaunch this in the next week or so. And I'll match what he's giving. But so it was humbling for sure, the needs that were out there, but I love the art community and the artist community in particular, the people that reached out, saying that they needed funds, clearly needed funds. We asked them to show proof of what their challenge, whether it was medical or eviction, food, and everybody stepped up and asked for what they needed and no more. And it was a really moving experience. But the Lifts initiative is, like I said, we just announced today our 4th winner. This was the first, this was the second. Nila, Guadalupe, and Victoria were the first 3 chosen, and Sam is this week's winner. And I don't know how in depth you want me to go, or do you want to open it up to discussion, or how am I doing, or how are we doing, right? Lee?
Yeah, you're doing fine. I think that's great. If we want to open up discussion, I think it'd be great if people have any questions. And feel free to raise your hand. And Lee, I don't know if you want to continue on the slides or if you want to get us back to gallery view.
Yeah, stop the share right now.
Yeah, if that's okay. Yeah. I mean, oh, maybe we have, and we did have one question in chat from Dory about one of the pieces, about the bike. Is that a pedal bike, no motor?
Correct.
Correct. Okay, perfect.
Well, no, it's both. It has it's electric bike, like an electric bike.
Yeah.
So she pedals.
Yeah. No.
While she's propelled by an electric motor.
Okay. And then there's another question from Maria Schneider, actually. Is there any specific criteria for the selection? For the, Maria, for the emergency funds or the lifts or all of the above, or maybe you want to answer all of the above?
Maybe for this price, for the ones that are choosing one every week, the lifts, is there any specific criteria to follow?
No, there is not a specific criteria, and we went at it like we did the original acquisition prize, where we really are just considering works that we feel, one, either I love and moved by, or appropriate for the collection right now, how it fits with the other works that we've already collected, is there, dialogue it's bringing to the collection, those kind of things. So it really is it's more of a curated acquisition, rather than saying, it fits into this. There's no political bent, no theme that we're running on, other than appropriate for the West collection, which is the limit. Truthfully, I have very broad taste. And I think in the first four, you can see that there really is no theme or focus, if you will, or box that the artists fall into. Thank you for the question.
Any other questions or comments right now?
I have a question for Paige, that would help with the administration of this thing, which is, Paige, how do you feel about artists submitting all their old work to the Lifts Initiative and works that cost more than $5,000?
Yes, that has been, thank you, Lee, for bringing that point up. So that has been interesting, and I think that we needed to, the fault is with us of not being clear, but we definitely, artists have submitted works that are either very old or priced, all of the works that have been submitted are priced above the $5,000 mark. And so, and some artists have written and said, well, my work doesn't sell for $5,000. So we're asking that artists definitely try to submit the $5,000. So some of the artists that have larger works, if there are drawings or smaller works that they can submit, that's great. We also like to encourage artists, or we like to explain to artists that even though you're submitting a small work, when we are reviewing every application, we go to websites or links that they've given us, whether it's gallery links or they have their own website or there's any kind of news. So we generally see the work more wholly, as whole as you can online. And so it's not just based on what has been submitted. So we like people to stay within the parameter of the $5,000 and maybe one or two pieces if they're usually working in larger or their work is more expensive. But it is an emerging prize in some ways, meaning these artists that we've chosen aren't necessarily emerging, but we definitely wanted to kind of stick with how we like to collect, which is more on the beginning of the careers of artists, beginning and middle, if you will, than established. Lee, does that help your administrative needs?
That's helping me in my job. Yes, thank you.
And there's a question in the chat from Stacy Lynn Waddell. Hi, Stacy, from North Carolina. A question about how you define emerging, which is a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And I'm sure I do not define it properly. So emerging for me is, like I just mentioned, someone at the beginning of their career, not necessarily an established artist. That doesn't mean that they don't have a gallery, but I'm definitely interested in, and the reason that I'm interested in working with an artist or finding an artist or starting to work with an artist when they're in the beginning of their career is because we also, one of the ways we like to collect is multiple works by a single artist. So we're not just kind of a one-off. We definitely like to keep a relationship with an artist and continue to collect as they continue to make work and move into new bodies of work. And so it's a lot of fun, if you will, and also not so bad as an investment goes when you find an artist who's at the beginning of their career and you kind of their journey with them as they become more established and popular, if you will. So I guess at the beginning of their career, that some artists could have a gallery, some can't. Even emerging artists with the gallery representation. We used to have a lot of fun with Joe, who started Pierogi in the Pierogi Gallery in Brooklyn, because he's always been a real supporter of artists at the beginning of their career, emerging artists, and so he would often send us. So in other words, gallery artists, we definitely, sorry for the long run on, but we definitely started the initiative originally. The West Prize was started because we wanted to get to artists that didn't have representation, or find a way to get to artists that were emerging, truly emerging, and show us your work. And that's one of the reasons that we started it. So that's emerging, and I'm sorry that was all over the place. Thank you for the question, Stacy.
And Brooke, I've unmuted you. You have a question?
Yeah. First of all, Paige and Lee, thank you so much for joining PAFA and this conversation, which I feel could go on and on. There's so much to what you're sharing that is aligned to the way we're working within the museum at PAFA. So it's great to hear from like-minded colleagues. And I really commend you for this new Lift Prize. I didn't know so much about the West Prize. That was before my time in Philadelphia. So it's really helpful also to hear the history that is coming with the Lift Prize. A lot of our online conversations at PAFA have been wanting to dig into how people in the art sector are feeling around COVID-19, how we're coping. What are our challenges? What are our opportunities? And you've had this opportunity to hear from 100 or more artists in these submissions. And I'm wondering if you could give us a kind of picture of what you've been hearing from the artists that are part of our community. What are they saying to you in their applications?
So the main thing that they're saying in the applications on the emergency funds was help. And I think that all of them expressed concern, because all of them showed us examples, every single one of them showed us examples of shows that had been canceled, jobs that they've lost, studio rents, they've lost studios because their landlords are worried that the artists can't pay and you're out kind of thing. And so help was the big, everybody's worried. On the Lifts initiative, one of the things we've done, we have 4 chosen artists so far, and we asked them, how has COVID-19, when we post their art and the acquisition, we also have 3 questions that we've asked each of the artists that they get to write in their own words. And one of the questions is, how has COVID and this pandemic affected you? And so you can go to westcollection.org and you can read of the 4 artists that have been selected thus far. They've all given really thoughtful, wonderful answers for how they're dealing with this. I do think that, in talking to colleagues, peers, I used to have a gallery. I started the Mixed Greens Gallery and ran that for 19 years. So I know a lot of people that are also in the gallery world, and have had lots of discussions around kind of how that's going and how everybody's trying to do virtual shows and trying to continue to support artists. But galleries are also very worried about paying rent and how some of them won't make it through. They'll lose their gallery, they fear, and some will survive it. And I think that we're going to see, we're going to come out of this with, just like the restaurant industry and whatnot, some will survive and some won't. But then I think there will be a return, hopefully. I mean, I'm hopeful and optimistic about a return to art. I think that when these types of things happen, it's very easy for the cultural to take the back seat. One thing personally that I can relate to here is that when my father came to me and said, I want to put some art at SEI, and I said, okay, if we're going to do this, let's do a collection and not just decorate the walls. And we decided, he said, okay, great, and SEI was going to pay for it. And I actually, having had a bit of discussion about corporate collections. Like I said, Lee and I did a lot of research. I worried about that because SEI is a publicly traded company. I knew that if anything started to happen financially with the company, the first thing to go would be the art. And I think and so I said, I would rather it not be owned by SEI, but that it's a personal collection that as a family, we own the art and it's on loan to SEI. And that was really to protect the artwork and the artists, and that these things didn't just all of a sudden go back into the marketplace. And I think that's, that experience of if in troubled times, the arts are the first to kind of be either ignored or funds aren't funneled in that direction, that eventually we get there. But first, there are a lot of other concerns that are focused on. And so I think as a collector, I kind of feel like it's a bit of my responsibility. I benefit from the works that I have collected. Hopefully, eventually financially if the works were ever sold, but also just by beautifying our spaces. And I feel as a collector, it's my responsibility to find any way I can to kind of help when the going gets tough. I'm very lucky to be in a position to be able to do that financially. So that was really the initiative behind, and Lee gets that. Lee and I we share our art heart. So that's.
Can I just say one thing, Paige, from your data?
Yeah, please.
That of 158, Brooke, 158 applications, artists ranking their biggest need first. 125 said shelter, and something like 26 said food, which was shocking. Wow. So just saying, it's pretty intense.
Yep. Thank you.
That's sobering news to end on, but we wrap up these events at 11:15, but it's something for us all to be thinking about and hopefully supporting each other in what we're doing. So thank you, Lee and Paige, and the West Collection for everything that you are doing for artists and in our community right now. And thank you for joining us today. And thanks everyone for joining. It's lovely to see you. I wish you a very good day and a great weekend. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care,
Yeah.
everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.